Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio. I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live and on demand from Buffalo, New York, where today is Sunday, September 18th, 2022. And I'm joined this is my immediate south, even though it's over here to the side, and to my east by Chris Gullo and Jesse Collings, respectively.
Those directions were not good.
Were they not good?
They were the complete opposite. When you were pointing to your south, you were pointing
Yes.
to your east, and then when
Yes.
you were pointing to your east, you were pointing to your south.
Well, we're broadcasting today from the metaverse. The normative universe is different from the metaverse. But yes, Chris Go, what are we going to be talking about today? On the program?
Yeah, we're going to discuss would a Warner Brothers Discovery NBCUniversal merger. What would that mean for wrestling? Talk about the possibility of that. We're going to actually also discuss the popularity of pro wrestling currently. Kind of a little of a data reaction to a tweet that was tweeted out this week.
I've heard there's a new boom period.
Yeah, new boom period. Yes. Also going to discuss some changes to the WWE board of directors and much more.
That's all we're talking about today. It sounds like you're bearing the lead to our YouTube viewers today that you are without facial hair today.
I am.
Provide us an update on that.
Sure. Yeah, I was trying to trim up my goatee and line it up a little bit different, and I took too much off on the one side, and I just shaved it all off, and I'm rebooting. I had a mustache for about a minute.
I heard about this. You denied our viewers the opportunity to see you in a mustache. True or false? Can you confirm that?
I can confirm that it was way too creepy.
The peak of the mask wearing phase of the pandemic was the optimal time to experiment with facial hair.
Yeah.
Like you could have kept the mustache and you wouldn't have had to actually reveal it in public. You could have had it like on the side for a long period of time.
That is, yeah, so it's true.
Yes. Okay. If people want to participate, how do they do that, Chris Gullo?
Yeah, so we actually have a super chat option here on the YouTube stream. When you ask your question, there's a little dollar sign. Put any amount that you see fit, and we will answer your questions throughout the show as they seek fit with the conversation.
Yes. So we have another week here. We've done programs in the past where we've talked about what's the potential value of AEW's TV deal in the next round. Is David Zaslav the second coming of Jamie Kellner? He's going to kill wrestling. And we have to do this again. As more news from the big media world has emerged, this is not just a wrestling podcast. This is a media podcast. And the Hollywood Reporter is the publication with the story that is setting some wrestling fans off this in recent days. The Hollywood Reporter reported what was this? The 16th, which is 2 days ago. So that was Friday. The Hollywood Reporter reported this: given WBD, that is Warner Brothers Discovery's daunting challenges, it has become accepted wisdom at the highest levels of the industry that another deal waits in the wings for Warner Brothers Discovery. For reasons related to the complicated structure of that merger, no negotiations between NBCU and WBD could happen until April 2024. But at that point, many industry observers believe that Comcast's Brian Roberts will make a long-awaited move, looking to combine NBCUniversal and Warner Brothers Discovery. That deal would face some interesting antitrust issues, but would give his company scale and a viable streaming service. Obviously, Peacock sucks, says one exec with knowledge of both companies. There are some good synergies. I'm sure Roberts is licking his chops because WBD stock is so low. And I think that's Zaslav's endgame. Get the place sold, end quote. Brian Roberts and NBCU CEO Jeff Shell met with Zaslav and board member John Malone during the Allen & Co. gathering in Sun Valley last July, but given the rules against plotting any combination, that was no doubt just a friendly get-together. A WBD spokesperson responds that, quote, "We are building Warner Brothers Discovery for the long term," end quote. So this couldn't happen. I mean, Deadline makes, or this is not Deadline, this is Hollywood Reporter makes it sound like a lot of people in the media industry take it as a foregone conclusion almost that Warner Brothers Discovery and NBCU, which is currently a part of Comcast. Sounds like Comcast would spin it off, or somewhere another NBCU would. That's what I gather from this. Maybe you guys read it differently, but the NBCU would separate from Comcast and become one with Warner Brothers Discovery. Again, this couldn't happen until April 2024 at the earliest, so that's the earliest they can begin negotiating about it, apparently because of some restrictions related to the merger between Warner Brothers, that is Warner Media, and Discovery, which has happened most recently. What would this mean for the wrestling business, if anything?
Me? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go first. Yeah, you go first, Judge.
I don't really have like a particular ton of interest in this story, if only because the speculation on it seems so rampant in the sense that they can't. We're talking about was it April 2024, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about that, and that's just when they can start negotiating legally, of course. So it's not like a merger is going to be happening on April 1st, 2024. And it just seems like the way the media landscape is changing between now and then, was it 18 months, 20 months from now, seems impossible to assume. We don't know what the media landscape is going to look like. We don't know what the streaming world is going to look like. We don't know what the economy in general is going to look like. We don't know what cable television is going to look like. We can have some assumptions based on trends that exist currently, but we don't really have a clear picture at all about what's going to happen in the media landscape. Now, the article gives off several quotes from people in the industry who seem pretty convinced that this is the trend, that this is what's going to happen, or that this is where things are going. But it seems like such a long period of time between now and then to really get too worked up about the potentials in the wrestling industry. I guess the biggest one would be that it would mean that WWE's main television partner, which is NBCU, and AEW's main television partner, which is Warner Brothers Discovery, would become one company, and therefore one company would be the main television partner for both of these wrestling companies, assuming that they're both of those wrestling companies are still signed to television deals in the future with those entities, which is not a guarantee.
I think it's very likely that, we're talking about April 2024 when they could legally begin negotiating. By that time, the new deals wouldn't be into effect, but are probably signed, whatever they are. I strongly expect WWE and NBCUniversal to make some sort of extension of their current agreement, probably continuing to carry Raw. Who knows what happens with SmackDown? NBCUniversal could end up with SmackDown too, but I don't know. I imagine that AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery end up in an extension of their current relationship. I imagine Dynamite stays probably on TBS, on some sort of Warner Brothers Discovery property. So by that time, if they even were to seriously talk about merging, the deals are probably already done at that point. That might jeopardize the future of WWE in the in this theoretically, hypothetically merged company. I guess that could jeopardize the future in like a further deal in the next term, but I don't see it as like, I've seen people talk this week about, well, if WWE and AEW end up being content on the same media platform, then WWE's gonna strong arm their network to push AEW off a cliff. And I don't think that's going to happen if we even get to that point, because I think those deals are made, and I think the content providers don't have the leverage over the media company at that point. And then there's the other factor of, WWE could end up being acquired by NBCUniversal by this point, but it's all very hypothetical, and I am frustrated by the speculation and the anxiety that people have in response to stories like this, that I think are, I don't know, the doom speculation is too much.
Could we have a prevention of this happening in the aspect of maybe when WWE signs their next deal, they do a no compete where, hey, you NBC Universal, you know, can we have you don't acquire any other wrestling programs or anything like that, just to kind of prevent this?
I don't know.
Maybe not prevent the merger, but prevent them sharing that. Second thing too, I believe NBC Universal, Comcast, and Warner Bros. Discovery are talking. Yes, I think they're discussing something else. I said this before, and I have like no inside sources, but I'm telling you, they're shopping DC comic properties because they're in huge debt, and that would be a huge payoff for them. And NBC Universal, where do they benefit from it? They have amusement parks. They have a film studio. That would be a huge purchase for them. They could do TV shows. Peacock would then get Batman movies and all this and that. I'm done. I mean, like, I'm just hypothetical here, but like,
Yes.
In regards to your leverage point, Brandon, like, so the NFL, which is obviously an enormous media partner with CBS and Fox and NBC and ESPN, these alternative football leagues that are popping up, whether the XFL 2.0 or 3.0 or the USFL or any of these other ones that have been launched in recent years,
Yes.
those football leagues have signed deals with CBS and Fox and I think ESPN, I'm not sure. But so the NFL is not blocking rival football leagues or whatnot from appearing
College
on
football, for that matter, arguably.
Yeah, college football. You can point to different sports entities, right? College football. If you have ESPN has a big deal with one conference, it doesn't stop them from negotiating with another college football conference. ESPN has La Liga, the Spanish soccer league, but they also have Serie A, the Italian soccer league. Mm-hmm. So we've seen this at least in other sports where the TV company, the media company, has deals with different entities that are within the same industry. It's not necessarily exclusive deals with one partner. And even if this merger happens, the number of like networks is unlikely to decrease. Maybe the number of streaming options is likely to decrease, but it's not like TBS and TNT will just evaporate and go away. Those networks are still always going to need content that draws steady revenue and steady viewership on, even if they merge. And where are you going to find that? Where are you going to find a company or a program that's going to do as well as AEW? It'd be almost impossible. You can't. It's another. People speculate this. Well, they'll fill it with, WWE superstars and main events and NXT Level Up, but that's not going to do the same numbers. It's not even going to be close.
Wrestling pettiness is different though than football and all these soccer and all these other leagues. Like WWE just might want to make a point that, hey, we'll sign this new deal with you, but we don't want any other wrestling programming. I mean,
but
I know
what's their leverage for that,
right? If anybody would, have
I know it doesn't have to be
the provider. It would be these other leagues, including the NFL, maybe including the soccer leagues.
But yeah, I understand Gullo's point in the sense that the wrestling, like WWE probably views AEW in a much more competitive, need to strangle it in the crib sense than the NFL would view like the relaunched XFL.
Yeah, and I think the wrestling media and wrestling fans tend to have a wrestling centric view of the world that I don't think is relevant in this case, right? Like, I don't think where in the pecking order does wrestling line up among all their content for either of these companies? It's very low. So I think the leverage that they would have, the idea that Nick Khan would in 2024 or 2025 go to the merged network and say, hey, if you don't drop AEW, if they don't drop AEW, then what? You're going to not provide Raw and or SmackDown to them, which is your biggest source of revenue. You're not going to air those programs on their networks, which is your biggest and most important medium of reach to reach your audiences, to make your product and your company relevant and to sell your tickets and to sell your merchandise.
Brandon, we know exactly what they're going to do. Those companies will not be able to provide and carry WrestleMania 4.
That's right. We've seen this all before. This is just Jim Crockett all over again.
Wrestling betting this.
I understand, but I wish people had more of a broad view of the media ecosystem when they talk about stuff like this.
Well,
It
so the Tubi lawsuit with MLW
true.
would give at least a little bit of insight, depending
Yes.
on how legitimate you believe that lawsuit is. In the case that MLW has with allegedly was Stephanie McMahon is called up
The
Fox and
the story of the allegations that MLW raises is that MLW is on the verge of making and announcing a deal with Tubi, which is a free ad supported streaming TV service that Fox owns. MLW says that MLW and Tubi were on the verge of announcing that deal, and then at the 11th hour, Stephanie McMahon came in and intervened and went to Fox executives and perhaps Tubi executives and got that deal killed, according to MLW, which has yet to raise, I don't know, further evidence that this happened, but that's what they claim in their lawsuit. There should be some updates on that, I believe, by the end of this month. But yeah, that's what they claim. I think that's a very different. Let's assume all that's true. I think that's very different. We're talking about a deal that is yet to be announced, at least. I think the MLW complaint says that they basically had agreed to the deal, but then Tubi canceled it. That's different from a network that has a show, Dynamite, that's performing number one or number two in the demo on its night among cable originals. That's a really important program for its network. MLW on Tubi had yet to air, had yet to demonstrate value. So I think it's a very different situation, even if all that is true. Anything else to add here? No. Okay. Moving on to another story from the broader media universe. This one from Deadline. This is about the T-Nets. I think that this story gives us a little bit of insight into just what the future of the T-Nets are. That is TNT, TBS, and True TV. We're especially interested, of course, in TNT and TBS because those are the homes of AEW content. Deadline reports this week there probably has been no other division of Warner Media more impacted by the Discovery merger than the T-Nets, which consists of TNT, TBS, and True TV. In the span of a couple of months after the transaction was completed, they got new leadership with Discovery's Kathleen Finch adding them to her portfolio, while the previous toppers exited. General Manager Brett White, Senior Vice President of Original Programming Adrian Orion, and Unscripted Chief Corey Henson. The show Snowpiercer, TNT's post-apocalyptic drama starring Jennifer Connelly and David Diggs, may be the last of the kind of high-end prestige drama, big stars and budgets in the $7 million to $8 million an episode range that the network has been doing since The Alienist in 2018. TNT is now looking for more cost-effective series that don't go after A-list movie talent and would complement the tentpole sports/unscripted programming on TNT, as well as the rest of the WBD suite of linear networks under Finch. That could include wrestling-themed shows, as AEW is a major draw on TNT, and scripted series that have the feel of some of the signature Discovery docuseries like The Deadliest Catch. IP-based genre series also are being explored, we hear. Before taking the turn to big-budget premium dramas under previous programming chief Kevin Riley, TNT had success with original crime procedurals that complemented its roster of off-network crime dramas, most notably The Closer and its spin-off Major Crimes. There remains some confusion among unscripted agents and producers as to the T-Net's messaging, with one source saying Finch's comments have been, quote, inconsistent, end quote, with remarks from some of its other network executives. Industry insiders argue that the T-Nets will need to keep offering desirable originals rather than a slate of repeats of Discovery shows such as 90 Day Fiancé for WBD to justify the significantly higher affiliate fees cable and satellite operators pay for those networks compared to the usual Discovery cable networks. However, the T-Net's main attraction is sports. TNT and TBS boast NBA and Major League Baseball coverage, wrestling, and last year they closed a big 7-year NHL deal. Additionally, they have NCAA basketball games In today's environment, proliferation of streaming live sports is what drives premium for linear networks, with entertainment considered an additive. So that's, I don't know. Who knows what's underlying that, the real information, real events that are underlying that report from Deadline. But that's encouraging to hear if you're AEW. I would think that they value things that are alive, they value sports, and if they're going to justify that, as they being TNTBS are going to justify affiliate fees, which is something we've touched on here before, that all these Discovery networks, which are loaded with unscripted reality shows and Food Network and things like that, Discovery, the Food Network, TLC, I believe the History Channel is a part of the Discovery world, right? All those networks do not have high affiliate fees. So the cost that is being passed down to you, the cable or satellite subscriber, that's for Discovery networks very low. But for networks in the Warner Media universe, including the T-Nets, that carry sports, including TNT and TBS, those networks do have significant affiliate fees, maybe something like $3 per subscriber or something like that, which is not something that Discovery has ever, up to this point, really had to manage domestically. So what happens going forward with that is I would think that they're going to continue to value sports, and maybe that helps AEW justify a good TV deal in the future.
We've seen this kind of speculation in the past, when, especially post-merger, with TNT and TBS announcing the cancellations of a lot of their scripted shows. And there's just I guess the debate is where AEW falls into the category. Are they considered a scripted show that the company is looking to kind of shed from its profile on these kind of networks, or do they fall into the dynamic live programming similar to professional sports that the company is going to want to continue to promote? This Deadline article seems to indicate that, at least from in that perspective, the view is that they fall closer to live sports, or the kind of dynamic programming that they want to have. Something I found interesting in the article was that they mentioned that Snowpiercer, they said, was about $7 or $8 million
Yes.
per episode. Yes. So they have 10 episode seasons. So we're talking about $75 million on Snowpiercer alone for 10 hours of first run content a year. And
how does that compare to AEW? Does anybody know?
Yes, can you remind that to us to what the...
It's
45, right?
45, 44. I would say it's 175 million over 4 years. That comes out to like 43.75. So about $44 million a year, probably escalating with each year by like 5 to 10%. But anyway, that comes out to like $800,000 per episode. Rampage and Dynamite. Mm-hmm. That's 3 hours of weekly content.
Right. We're talking about 10 hours of television a year versus well over 100 hours, of 160, right? Almost.
So you said, and I don't know, Snowpiercer is 10 episodes a year?
10 episode seasons. Yeah.
How many seasons per year?
My understanding is they've had one season per year.
Okay.
They've had a season they had a season in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and they have, I think, season 4 is, I don't know when season 4 is debuting, but
so anyway, if we take the low end of that range, 7 million per episode, 10 and only 10 episodes a year, that still comes out to $70 million a year, which is almost twice as much. If we take the high end, it's nearly twice as much as what AEW is getting.
And it's not performing nearly as well from a ratings perspective either.
Right. Maybe that's certainly in first run. I imagine that there's more than just that Snowpiercer is being used for more than just first run airings. I'm sure they fill it on other time slots throughout the week, and maybe there's streaming value in it. Maybe there's licensing of it internationally. So there may be other things that don't immediately jump to mind for us here in terms of how they're extracting value from a series like that. But
But
that's a huge difference.
even if you fill it with sitcoms, right? So like the average sitcom can run for 22 episode seasons, and that's, I believe it's like anywhere from 3.5 to 5 million an episode for a sitcom, and that's just for 22 episodes. That's 77 million there. So like it's
Wrestling
just
is cheap programming.
yeah.
And we have, I guess this is based purely on just speculation and no real knowledge on my behalf. So before I go forward, I'll just clarify that. I don't really know that much about what I'm talking about. But I feel like from a television perspective, we lived in a world not that long ago, like 10 years ago, we'll say, where kind of the T-nets, their main competitors, were finding tremendous success in scripted television shows. First, both on FX, which would be one of their main competitive cable stations, and as well as AMC. And it seems like there was a big rush, both from the T-nets, and we also saw USA attempt this as well, to create their own kind of prestigious scripted television shows that kind of maybe didn't exist as much in previous generations of cable television. And it feels like now that the streaming world has taken off, that has kind of slipped, and we don't have shows like Better Call Saul just had its finale on AMC, but you don't see the kind of massive hit shows that you used to see, either on FX or on AMC. And I think the Turner networks at least are recognizing that maybe they need to shift from pumping money into a prestigious show like Snowpiercer with Hollywood actors and adapting it from a successful movie, and instead looking for, like we've talked about, more live, maybe reality show, maybe docu-series, and of course live sports programming. And it seems like they're finally hitting that shift in the nature of what the future of cable television is. Because if you watch the Emmys or followed at least the results of the Emmys, it wasn't like cable television was cleaning up. It wasn't like network television was cleaning up. All of the awards, for the most part, went to streaming networks, programs. That's where the prestige is at the moment. And I don't know if you're going to be able to find that on cable networks in the future.
Right. Yeah, I just think over time we're going to continue to see sports and news be where cable gets its value, where that's where people are going to consume sports and news, because it has to be live. Maybe eventually streaming picks that up too, because they can do live broadcasts just like cable can and broadcast can. But yeah, and scripted programming continues to be this thing that you can watch at any time. You can watch The Sopranos, episodes from 1999. People still do, just as well as they watch Better Call Saul from.
Yes, I'm watching The Wire right now.
Are you? That's the greatest show of all time.
We've referenced The Wire on here.
Yes, we have.
I finished season 1 last night.
We've taken lessons from Stringer Bell. Stringer Bell taught us about price and elasticity. I think he taught us about.
Yeah, that's in his first season. He takes the class at the community college and then starts talking about it on the street corner. Yeah. You guys think you have an elastic product? You don't. You have an inelastic product. That's right.
So big fan of The Wire. Also, there's the I guess it's like a spin-off of The Wire, kind of. It's a short limited series that I don't know it must be on HBO Max, right? With it's another like Baltimore police drama.
Is that what's it called? I'm gonna look it up now. Is it Oz?
No. It's new. It's like came out last year. Anyway, if anybody knows in the chat, you can remind us.
We actually do have a super chat.
Do we?
Yes, Tim B. Does the TV deal timeline line up where we could see a fiscal quarter where AEW is the most profitable wrestling company in history for a short time?
How would that work, Tim B? No, probably not.
Because AEW, what he's I think asking is if AEW's next television deal could be bigger than WWE's current television deal, and that there could be a period of time where AEW is making more money than WWE because the television deal, their next generation television deal, would hit sooner.
But that's not going to happen. That's not the way the timeline lines up, right? And
no, but that's what I think he's getting at.
Okay.
That's where I would say like that's where he thinks that could happen.
So, all right, a couple things here then. WWE's current Raw and SmackDown deals in the U.S. expire at the end of September 2024. AEW's deals, assuming the option is picked up, expire the following December, so 3 months apart there. So AEW, if they both get massive increases, let's just assume they both get massive increases, AEW starts getting the payments after WWE starts getting their first new deal payments. Secondly to that, I don't think AEW is going to end up with a higher deal than WWE. Yes, this is the program. I'm the person who's made the argument that if you just look at ratings, you can make an argument that AEW is undervalued by 3x to 5x based on what they deliver compared to what WWE delivers, what the NHL delivers, based on ratings and the amount of content in terms of hours provided per week. Even if they got a 5x increase, right? Even if we multiplied AEW's 44 times 5, that's $220 million average annual value. For Dynamite and Rampage, that's 220. What's Raw by itself worth? Average annual value, anybody know?
Is it 250?
265.
265,
265 just for Raw would currently exceed that. Not to mention if they got an increase at 1.5x, which is my base case and Morgan Stanley's base case for expectations, right? And then SmackDown is an additional 205. So they're getting $470 million average annual value right now. 470. If you multiplied AEW by 5 ahead of that, you're still only at 220 versus 470. If I'm understanding the question right, the answer is no. Thank you, Timothy. Do we have anything else up?
No, that's what we have there for super chats.
Ooh. Okay. Moving on to Tony Khan's tweet also on Friday. Tony Khan tweets, "Right now, numbers say wrestling is hot. Many of us lived through a prior wrestling boom or booms and know some telltale signs. Have you had friends who ask you about wrestling lately looking to catch up? Have you gotten questions about wrestling from people who have never asked before? Have either of you experienced these sorts of questions in recent memory?"
Yeah, a little bit. Not entirely. I don't know about catching up, but I would say like a lot with the Vince McMahon scandal. People ask me what's going on, and so what's going to happen? What's going to happen in WWE when Vince McMahon is in charge? And then trying to explain to them what my belief of Triple H's vision of wrestling is. I think when AEW first launched, there was more maybe curiosity in the sense that people were like, yeah, what's this AEW? What's that thing? They might have started advertised during the NBA playoffs or something like that where they were watching it. But I don't really get a lot of, but that would be the extent of it. I don't necessarily I don't feel like I get a lot of people talking to me who are really invested in potentially watching again. I think it's more people who are curious about what's happening to the wrestling, but aren't necessarily interested in feeling like the product itself is hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The interest from people just be like, oh, what is this AEW? Or, oh, is that where, Dean Ambrose is now? Like those questions. But no one's saying, oh, so tell me what happened on Dynamite last week. So they kind of, I should definitely watch that. They just kind of, oh, that big star, they heard they're over there, or that big thing. Like, got a couple questions on the CM Punk stuff. So what's this CM Punk press conference thing? They didn't know any of the details or anything like that. They just saw something on Twitter and they were just curious.
More importantly, go ahead.
No one is coming up to me asking me about Dominic Mysterio and joining Judgment Day.
No.
More I don't have a beard barber though, so if I had one, I might ask about that.
They would at least ask you about Bad Bunny, or maybe Logan Paul. More importantly, are we on the verge of a wrestling boom? Or are we in a wrestling boom? Silence.
We were in one. If we were technically in, we were in one, and we're in one now. For just going by how much money these companies are making. But I don't think
I
that's what
think-
people think of when they think of wrestling boom. They think of ubiquitous popularity.
True.
And just my stance is that our monoculture that existed in previous generations is dead. So how popular can wrestling really become in a 2022 environment versus like what we would have considered popular in previous generations? And that goes across pretty much all media across the board.
Yeah. The financial opportunity for the two major U.S. companies is big because of the stress that's been put on the cable bundle for the most popular programming, as everything else is fragmented in popularity. This is not a boom period in terms of consumer interest. I'm the oldest one of these three boxes on the screen right now, I think. Go, how old were you in the Attitude Era?
So
say
I'm gonna
99.
be 35 on Saturday. So
don't mind.
yeah, no. So I would have been for like 12, I think, in that, or 11 in '99 actually. Yeah. Right?
Jesse, do you remember the Attitude Era?
No.
You don't remember the Attitude Era?
I was born in 94, so
I'm gonna retire. So
no, like
yeah.
no.
No,
Like-
no memories of Stone Cold Steve Austin crushing beers and Vince McMahon, pulling a gun on Vince McMahon and Brian
No.
Pillman.
I mean, my cousin went to WrestleMania 14. I remember, like he had the chair from it, but
That's
like
Philadelphia,
my
right?
no, that would be Boston.
That was Boston. Okay.
Yeah, that's how my cousin went to it.
Well, 15 was Philadelphia.
Yeah, 15
Anyway.
was Philadelphia. No, to me, it's like my experience with the Attitude Era, outside of like watching it back years later, would be like playing some of the video games from that time period when I was like 7 or 8 years old, like playing it on my friend's N64, playing. I don't know if I ever played
No Mercy
or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever what games I specifically played. There's more. I actually don't think the main game I played was No Mercy, but I don't know what it was called. But like that would be that's when I like would really have like as a child understood who like The Undertaker was and The Rock and Steve Austin and Triple H and those kind of people. Like that would be my experience.
No
The
memory
Attitude
of
Era.
the Attitude Era.
No memory of the Attitude Era. The first wrestling match I ever remember watching on television was The Undertaker versus JBL in 2005.
My God. Anyway,
That was when I was tuning out for a little bit.
I was
Yeah, I mean,
wrestling at that point.
That's when I was 10. So,
I was going to college.
Yeah.
and there's people much younger than me out there. I'm 28 years
I've heard
old.
that there are people who are
So-
even younger than that in the world.
Yes.
So as Tony Khan tweets here, let's investigate the premise. Right now, the numbers say wrestling is hot. It depends on what he means by right now. If he means in the last week or 2 weeks, so sort of that's there's a better case for that. In the last, I don't know, year or so, not so much. So I sat down and I pulled all these numbers here. And we thank Tony Khan for helping produce this episode of Wrestlenomics and giving us a topic to talk about here. So what did I do here? I lined up a bunch of comparisons over time. So what I looked at was, here's the trailing 90 days. What have the last 90 days been like for TV ratings, tickets distributed, Google web search, YouTube views, and then for reception? I know this is not directly tied to business, but as the downfall of Vince McMahon, I think has taught me, the quality of your product actually matters. But anyway, so we got Cage Match, the number of matches that you had on Cage Match in your promotion that were rated 8.0 or higher, the number of matches in the time period. And then I asked, what are the percent? So they do on cagematch.net, if you don't know, they rate matches, but then they also rate entire events, including TV events, pay-per-view events. What is the percentage of the events that you put on that were rated 8.0 or higher? So anyway, and the TV ratings that we're going with here are P18 to 49. So the TV ratings, tickets distributed, web search, YouTube views, number of 8.0, essentially 4-star matches that you put on, the percentage of well-received events that you put on. And I counted up all those deltas. And I looked at the current trailing 90 days against the 90 days before that, the current 90 days versus the same 90 days last year, the current 90 days versus the same 90 days 2 years ago. Make all these comparisons over time. And what we end up seeing is, I continue to monitor Stardom. Stardom, although on the global scale, is a very, very, very small company compared to WWE or even AEW, but is the one company that continues to show increasing consumer interest. Obviously, we don't have P18 to 49 US ratings for Stardom. But other than that, the one that looks the best by this sort of analysis is WWE. AEW's deltas are less than half positive. Their TV ratings year over year in 18 to 49 are down. Their TV ratings in these 90 days versus the 90 days prior are down. Tickets distributed, according to WrestleTix, in those comparisons, is slightly down. Web search is down. Web search compared to 2 years ago, though, is up. YouTube views, these 90 days versus the 90 days before that, is down. Year-over-year comparisons look better, though. The quality of their content, if we just base this on cagematch.net data, that looks good. New Japan does not look good by this analysis. Impact looks better than AEW by this analysis. So I don't think there's a boom period at it by any typical sense happening here. If anything is happening in terms of there being increased fan interest for a wrestling brand, it's WWE more than AEW. Although Dynamite did do a good rating this past Wednesday.
And Raw did not.
And Raw went up against Monday Night Football, and Raw did not. But yeah. Oh, here's all these images that I could have gone through. But yeah. Anything else to add here?
Sorry, do you have the
good
data?
Way to think about it? Yeah.
Do you have the data for a number of cage match ratings that are going into the system from year to year?
Yes, but it's it would take me
because
a minute to pull it up.
I'd be curious to know. I'd be curious to know if WWE is in particular. I'm assuming the other stuff maybe as well, but I get the sense that WWE at least is getting more popular in the number of ratings that it's getting on Cage Match. And I'm not sure if that's maybe Cage Match becoming a site that is expanding beyond just a niche market of wrestling fans. Because, for me, Cage Match was always this weird German site that you'd go on to find out all these...
cagematch.de.
Yeah. But I feel like it's become more maybe ubiquitous within wrestling culture. And that I'd be interested in seeing if you're getting, because you're getting one of the things about like the ratings from Cage Match are, I get the sense that most of the ratings are being based off of the relative content on the shows themselves. So an AEW match being rated an 8 is generally being compared to other AEW matches, as opposed to in WWE matches are being compared to other WWE matches. It's not necessarily
You're saying the inmates are grading on a curve.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that I don't know how like the cross comparison between promotions and how useful that is. And I get the sense that more WWE fans have found Cage Match, and those fans might be not overrating WWE necessarily, but perhaps have a more favorable view on WWE because they might not have watched other wrestling promotions. And I get that sense that a match that's like a...
I think it's important to notice here too. Like what we're looking at here is WWE sort of against itself, which I think expresses that even if the voters are grading WWE on an easier scale, they're still looking at it more positively than they did in prior periods of time. But I'm going to try to pull this, the number of matches that are rated up, if I can. Event ratings. And we want WWE specifically, right?
I'd be curious to know if WWE and I guess AEW would be helpful from a to get another perspective, like on like if they are more popular within cage match. Stardom, like I know, is more popular within cage match. New Japan, I assume, is less popular.
Yeah, we do have more over time. I don't know what they're. I have to do the math. So there's in 2019 only 275 match ratings for WWE in 2019. This at this point into 2022, 533. So more than double.
Are these different matches that have a rating, or are these all? These are these
matches that have a rating. Yes.
right? And I believe cage match since 2019 has also kind of changed their formula and that made it easier for people to vote on match ratings.
The number of votes is not up as much. Can I share this? If I stop sharing that and I share the Excel spreadsheet window monthly, here's what I'm looking at. We can try to make this bigger. So this is for WWE. The number of votes is like approaching 40,000 on the year, so it'll probably surpass last year for the number of votes. And this is the number of actual matches that have been voted on. You know, this year 533, last year 788, the year before that the pandemic period for whatever that. I mean, it's probably a similar number of matches that happened on television, 527. So this year has already surpassed 2020.
Right.
And you have to have like probably like a minimum number of votes to even be displayed as a rating, right?
I think you need at least 10. Or maybe it's 15. If you go on like Stardom, where they maybe don't get as many match ratings, you can see like it will tell you like, you know, this match is rated an 8.73 based on, you know, 15 ratings or based on 20 ratings. Or for most WWE or AEW matches, it's usually over 100.
And this is AEW, which has already in this year more matches rated than last year. We got 558. I guess granted that this year has an entire year of Rampage and last year did not have 7 months worth of Rampage. A lot more votes though. So I guess you could say that the people are on Cage Match are more active in voting for AEW matches than they are for WWE matches. We have 62,000, almost 63,000 votes this year, which is more than any year prior.
I mean, we can talk to Striga if we want to, but
yes.
I think the Cage Match's system has made it a little bit more user-friendly to vote on matches. Now, if you look at any card or event, they have the match ratings displayed easier, and it's very easy, I feel like, from a user perspective to rate a match on Cage Match as opposed to in the past it maybe involved a little bit more clicking. And that somewhat explains the increase in ratings beyond just the fact that there's more users, more inmates, as they're called, on Cage Match.
The inmates. And here's Stardom with 366 matches year to date, 555 last year, 11,000 votes this year, almost 15,000
and those are just
last
demolishing the numbers from 2019 and 2020.
I would say, without doing the math, it's on track to exceed last year. Yeah. What you're saying is this. Yeah, these years, 2019 and 2020, way ahead. Yeah.
I mean, Jesse mentioned it earlier, though. Like, I just think that Cage Match is more part of the internet wrestling fan culture than it was a few years ago. I think for the years, and you could attest this, Brandon, it's kind of just something for us to know. Like, oh, when was the last time this guy worked at this promotion or whatever like that? Like, I only ever heard people that were actually in wrestling talk about it.
Border Patrol uses it.
Yeah. Yep. The Steve's crossing the border and everything. Yeah.
Am I wrong here? Debate me if you disagree. Even if I don't know. Even if the composition of the, I guess if the composition of the voters has changed, maybe that changes the argument. But even I think there's meaning in looking at how the audience apparently is digesting any given product. Like if WWE was, you know, only what do we have on here? If I put the slides back up on the screen, you know, very few WWE events were rated above an 8, and I'm talking about events now, which is different from matches, but very few events were rated an 8 or higher, whereas it's right here. So in the 3 months prior to these last 3 months, which is late March to late June, the final months of the Vince McMahon era, only 2% of the events were rated an 8 or higher. Now it's up to 11. Not a lot, but that's 8 times higher, right? 8 times 2 is no. It's a lot higher. It's like 5 times higher than what it was before, which, even if that's being just sort of graded in its own universe, tells me something about how these events and matches, perhaps, which are also higher, are being perceived now versus a prior point in time. Is that meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think, especially over the last 3 months, the consensus is that the wrestling on WWE shows is significantly better. You've highlighted the amount of wrestling time that we see on Raw and SmackDown, which generally probably correlates well with matches getting higher ratings, right?
I think it does, yes.
The more 15-minute matches that you're having on television, the more likely you are to have a match rated 8 or higher.
Yeah.
And Triple H is obviously much more progressive in how he views a lot of wrestling talent, and where he's not afraid of being like, hey, Ricochet, go out and wrestle a 12-minute match, or Chad Gable, or obviously bringing in Johnny Gargano, or guys that are going to be capable of, or at least have long track records of having really successful wrestling matches. And so that obviously plays a role in making people, I know people think that wrestling, some people argue that wrestling matches being good does not draw. And it's about stars and feuds and storylines and all that, which is true. But if you're presenting a product that people are like, you know what, these matches are really good, those people are more likely to continue tuning into your product, as opposed to, these matches are really bad and I don't want to watch the show anymore. I think they hold a lot of value to retaining viewers. For starters, we've seen that across the board, where when you have longer matches, viewers are retained. We saw that with
AEW. We've seen that.
Yep,
bear
we
out
saw
4
that
hours.
in the Dynamite rating this week was a good example of that. So there's obviously, I think, benefits to having high quality wrestling matches, and most importantly, and this is something that WWE has struggled with so much over the years, is servicing your core audience, making the fans who are interested in your product feel like they're getting something out of watching a product, as opposed to frustrating them. Now, I don't think a lot has changed on that end with a lot of the broader booking strategies, but as far as at least giving them stuff to entertain them, as opposed to doing very short matches or not a lot of matches, or having a lot of talking, or doing bad finishes, at least having more matches that people are like, you know what, that was a really good wrestling match, services those fans in a way that they maybe have been neglected over the recent years.
Yeah, I think in today's environment, where there are so many entertainment options, where I think, like you said, Jesse, we do not have the monoculture that we used to have, that we had in the Attitude Era years of '99 to 2001, that we had in the peak years of WWF's run in the '80s. There's extreme competition for entertainment. That combined, so what does that mean? That means that the audiences that you do have are going to be more niche, are going to be more selective, maybe, and more discerning about whether or not they're going to watch your product. I see that, and I think there's an age bias in that, which is why when we see a big rating, the big increase, with the exception perhaps this week, the big increase is with viewers 18 to 34, and the P50 plus, by comparison, barely moves. So I think we have a highly selective audience, more so than we had in the past. And I think the real promoters in wrestling have become wrestling fans online, who, despite what Tony Khan wants to say about how there's a boom era and he promotes Dynamite and Rampage on Twitter every week, we know that he has a deeply vested interest in you watching those shows. The people who don't have a deeply vested in, well, maybe some of them do, but the people who are more likely to be honest are people who you know in person, sure, but also the increasing impressions that people in general on social media are collecting in hopefully honestly recommending a show, or telling you that this show sucks and I'm frustrated watching it, and you'll probably have a similar experience if you watch it. So that, what am I saying? That this old idea that only the casual fans matter and good matches don't matter, and that's stupid, and that's just playing to the dirt sheet reading marks. Screw that idea. Is an outdated idea. It's not as simple. That's not simply true or simply false.
Brandon, Brandon, that's a straw man argument made by people who have a very limited view on professional wrestling and what it can be. It's often used as a counterpoint when people bring up a really good match and they say, well, I don't know those stars, so who cares about how good the match was? I don't know who those stars are, and star power is what matters. Which is a straw man argument that doesn't really exist in the real world. The best wrestling matches that you have seen in your life are probably matches that involved wrestlers who you really cared about, which would be stars, at least to you, and they told an excellent story in their match. It's not going to be a 20-minute match between two preliminary wrestlers that you do not recognize. So anyone that says big matches don't draw, it's storylines, it's superstars, all of that it's all the same piece of art. You need to have all of those things to have an excellent match, and you need to have all of those things to draw really well. If we can't go back in time, I think, to the halcyon days of the 1980s WWF, where the matches could be the main event matches could be absolutely terrible, and they would still draw. That's just not going to happen. The world we live in now, all of those things are demanded to draw. You need to you need to have a good match, and you need to have storylines and angles to have a good match. So I always thought that was just a straw man argument by people who were frustrated that they maybe don't recognize good wrestling universally and only recognize good wrestling within a limited WWE branded scope of it.
Yeah, I think this sort of came to mind in the context of WoW. So this is the piece in the Wall Street Journal that I was trying to answer some questions for that came out the other day, and how WoW is, in theory, got pretty good distribution. They're on in syndication in every market in the United States, every single market. I couldn't figure out what channel or what time to watch them on in Buffalo, which is the issue, part of the issue there. But if you look at the brands, the wrestling brands that have broken out and increased them in popularity in the late 2010s, in my view, those brands are NXT, New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe a little bit of Ring of Honor, maybe earlier on in that half of the decade, and AEW. Why were they able to gather the consumer interest that they were able to gather? In large part, well, yes, it was the quality of the products that they put on. It was the talent that they had. Partly it was the distribution access that they had. But it was also the social media promotion of people who organically recommended those products.
Right. In that you've mentioned the people on social media and getting positive social media buzz kind of universally, or at least getting a majority of people to talk about it, is such a valuable marketing tool for anything. I mean, it goes far beyond wrestling. I'm sure that it's something that's being closely monitored in the streaming service, the streaming world, and movie studios and music. Getting buzz online is how you reach people today across the board.
If I could add, and to contrast, they didn't grow in popularity and consumer interest because they did something to appeal to this sort of broader, casual, mainstream audience that supposedly is just, in this locked box, just waiting for somebody to unlock it. They appealed to wrestling fans who recommended their products to other wrestling fans.
Right. You want to do a smaller scale, a very smaller scale recent example, right? Have you seen this Jun Kasai El Desperado match? Either of you?
No, have you? What company is this?
Okay, so this is Taka Michinoku's promotion, Just Tap Out. Okay. And so they had Jun Kasai and El Desperado had a main event match earlier this month. And they had this total deathmatch, bloodbath match, right? And I would have never seen this match. I'm not a big Just Tap Out fan. I'm not watching every show. I wouldn't even know what happened, except the people who were watching it, which was a very niche audience of people who were into the hardcore deathmatch scene in Japan. were saying it's like the match of the year. And I saw on social media people talking about, oh my God, this El Desperado Jun Kasai match. It's so great. Everyone should watch it. You need to watch this match. If you're making a match of the year list, you have to watch this match. And so I watched it, and I know Dave Meltzer watched it based on recommendations from tons of people. And of course, this is a much smaller scale than maybe people convincing other people to tune into AEW, but it wasn't because they had this match that catered towards wrestling fans outside of the deathmatch bubble. It was just a really excellent version of their style of wrestling that got their niche hardcore fan base really to kind of align themselves in a informal campaign to push this match as something other people should watch. And I'm
To
sure
add,
no, go ahead. I'm kind of done.
I was going to say, to add to your point, social media is really a big factor of why GCW has increased in popularity the last few years. Like, it can be argued that GCW is the third biggest company in the United States. It can be argued with that. And anytime they're having an event,
I get DMs now.
Well, the third, I mean, you know, but anytime they have an event, it's always like a number one trend on Twitter.
Yeah, and in some ways, GCW's social media performance outstrips its actual business performance. That people will be talking, you'll see a lot of people talking about GCW online, but if you look at how many tickets they actually sold to their shows, you know, some of them do quite well, but some of them do not particularly well at all. And this is a point that I've heard made before, is that if you were to compare like New Japan Pro Wrestling's ticket sales in the United States to GCW's ticket sales in the United States, GCW runs more frequently, but New Japan draws significantly more on average for their shows. But most people, if you were to ask, would say GCW's really hot in the United States and New Japan's not hot in the United States. And that's because of social media. As you said, Gallo, GCW's like, whenever they have a show, it's trending all over social media. If you follow a lot of wrestling accounts on social media, which I'm assuming we all do, and probably most people listening to this show do, New Japan has a very bad social media policy and a very arcane sense of it, where you basically can't share any content at all about New Japan that's outside of the text realm,
which is probably influenced by their TV partner.
Right. So for people who don't know, their New Japan's television partner is very aggressive in sending copyright strikes if you send if you send out GIFs or video clips of their shows, which a lot of people would say has hurt Western popularity of New Japan, because things like the G1 can be happening and you won't see that much social media buzz, because even if the matches are really good, not seeing the GIFs of certain things and video clips really keeps the discussion of it limited in a way that a company like GCW or most companies in the United States don't have.
And another thing that comes to mind in the context of this is like the buzz that you're able to get online is possibly translatable to a global audience that might consume you on media. Like, I mean, ideally, a pay-per-view, a streaming subscription, whether that's, you know, Fight or IWTV or whatever. I think a good example of that is, think about like one of the best drawing indies in the United States is NEW. Next, was NEW stand for?
Northeast Wrestling.
Northeast. I almost.
Yeah, I know where you were going.
I almost went to the former Rochester company. And they go to baseball parks, right? They draw thousands, which is extremely rare for an indie
big
company.
Name too, big AEW names in those shows.
Right, but like you never hear, I don't anyway. Do you hear about the great match that happened at NEW? I never hear that. I never see people talking about the matches and telling people to seek out the matches or the shows or whatever. And I think, you know, contrast that against, like, just to use our local indie that Golo and I are both involved with, like ESW has drawn shows with nearly 1,000 people, but nobody's ever heard of this company beyond our Western New York area. Compare that to like companies like, I would say, like maybe Beyond or Chikara over the years that have had very small audiences live, but were able to evolve, right? That have had relatively small live attendances by sight, but have encouraged a lot more media consumption of their products.
I mean, yeah, like, so there's kind of different levels of indie wrestling. I feel like there's the buzzy,
especially in certain countries. But anyway,
yeah,
yes.
and there's buzzy indies that exist for online buzz to cater towards more the hardcore wrestling fan. There are also indies that will bring in old WWE legends and names like that. They'll bring in a Bret Hart to a show, or they'll bring in um, Jerry the King Lawler, and those they will draw very well. But because no one really cares about Jerry the King Lawler wrestling a wrestling match on an indie show in 2022. You won't necessarily hear about that online, even if they draw a much larger house than an indie that's main eventing with. I'll pick two contemporary indie wrestlers. I don't want to give any names because I don't want anyone to get mad at me. But they will not. That match might get a lot more positive buzz, but they're not going to get the same kind of draw. They're not going to have, even if they don't have the same kind of star power. At least to people online, there are plenty of lucha shows that run on the border states that will bring in lucha stars from Mexico and draw over 1,000 people.
And that's been happening for 20 years.
Yeah, and you'll almost never hear about them because it's outside of the scope of what you normally see discussed on social media when it comes to wrestling. Is that nobody cares that, El Hijo del Santo drew, 1,800 people to a show in Laredo, Texas. That's nothing compared to if GCW draws the same size crowd for the Hammerstein Ballroom. It's this huge event.
Yeah. Okay. Didn't expect to go there. That's a good discussion. Again, if anybody wants to throw a super chat in, we will address your comment or question.
We have a bunch of super chats. We'll answer them all at the end, I think, because they're all kind of all the topics that we talked about. So,
okay, great. So I have to make a correction, as I was corrected after our program last week, where we were speculating on whether, or at least I was, on whether AEW and the Jacksonville Jaguars are sharing a lot of employees. I was told afterward that very few. There's very less than I was speculating, or less than I was saying. Mega Perrick, who is the chief legal officer for the Jaguars and is the chief legal counsel for AEW, she works for both the Jaguars and AEW. I guess Tony Khan does work for both, right? The Jaguars and AEW share and use the same PR firm, Fleischman Hillard. But other than that, I'm told that those are the only overlap between the Jaguars and AEW. So there's that. And then we have the W Board of Directors has changed. Vince McMahon is no longer the chairman. Connor Schell stepped away in July. And now Erica Nardini, the Barstool CEO, has left the board of directors. And we have two new members of the board of directors, Michelle McKenna, who's the former chief information officer for the NFL, and Joellen Lyons Dillon, who is a former executive for X1. Does anybody know what the X1 company is? I used to hold shares in X1. So
no idea.
It's a 3D printing company. So their press release mentions that Michelle McKenna spent more than 2 decades as a senior leader at Disney, Universal Studios, and the NFL, working across technology, digital strategy, and finance. From 2012 to 2022, McKenna served as chief information officer for the NFL, where she was responsible for the league's technology strategy, and served as the executive sponsor of the Women's Interactive Group. She serves on the board of directors for Ring Central, where she is. What is Ring Central? Where she is a member of the Audit Compensation Committee, yada yada. She previously served on the Inspirity board of directors. Dillon, who is the former X1 executive, has 30 years of combined public company experience in global business. And now here's the note that everyone pointed out. She has experience in M&A and legal. M&A stands for? What does M&A? No one knows what M&A stands for? M&A? Mergers and acquisitions. So, if WWE were to end up being acquired or were to merge with some other company, maybe she would be very helpful with that. So yeah, that's what's happening there. I don't have a ton to add to that. Maybe you guys do, but this is what the board consists of now. It's largely executives, people who are either current executives in other companies or people who are apparently like retired executives or no longer executives in major companies, including Manjit Singh, who is the lead independent member of the board of directors. We still have now 3 members of the board of directors who are also executives in WWE, including Stephanie McMahon, who's the chairwoman, of course. Nick Khan is a member. Paul Levesque is a member. And that's it. Only 3 members from WWE. We also have Jeffrey Speed, who's a former Six Flags executive. Steve Heyman, who is now in charge of, how do you say this company's name? Versus? I'm guessing it's just Versus. It's with
Versus.
Yeah. He formerly was the COO for Beyonce's entertainment company, Parkwood Entertainment. Alan Wexler, who's a executive with General Motors. Steve Koonin, who is the CEO of the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Ignace Laoud, who is a executive for Majid Al Fatam, which is a Middle East-based retail mall company. And now the addition of Michelle McKenna and Joellen Lyons Dillon. I think there are some questions that I don't know the answers to around what leads to, I mean, the explanation, to be clear, the explanation around, which is in a filing, W disclosed that Eric Nardini, the Barstool CEO, was leaving in an 8K filing where they said, as they similarly said when Connor Schell left in July, Nardini's decision to resign from the board was not due to any dispute or disagreement with the company, its management, or any matter relating to the company's operations, policies, or practices. I think it's worth noting, too, that Nardini and Schell were not members of the board of directors for a very long time. I would say less than 2 years. While others have been on this board for, at least Jeffrey Speed has been on this board for a pretty long time. Payman's probably been on the board longer now. Manjit Singh and Wexler have been on the board longer now. Did their exit from the board have anything to do with the investigation related to Vince McMahon? I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever get an honest, a reliable answer to that question. But they say no, it's got nothing to do with any problem. Don't worry about it. So that's all I have to say about that. If you guys have anything to add, feel free. Michelle McKenna posted on LinkedIn that she's very happy to be joining the board of directors and excited to work with Stephanie McMahon. I'm waiting for someone to post on, have you ever come across like a negative post on LinkedIn?
No.
No, I have not. I actually think that a lot of, I don't know what this one specifically is, but LinkedIn has a lot of standard like prompts where they're like, congratulate someone on a new job, or like, do you want to post about your new job? And it's always the very canned kind of like, I am excited to be starting a position, insert position here at insert company here, and then some general platitudes. That's what it kind of sounds like. I mean, LinkedIn is in a lot of ways like the worst social media platform because it's definitely the place where people are the fakest. Even
but it's also the most well behaved.
It is because it's professional. It is professional, but
because everything you're saying is like, click here for my resume.
Yeah, every word on it comes across as extremely disingenuous, right down to Michelle McKenna's title of being a thought leader. Like, is that really her title, or is that just
we're thought leaders here too? We're thought leaders in the wrestling media business space,
for sure. But it's always like everyone just uses vocabulary that you use on resumes and not which of course is vocabulary that nobody uses in real life. So everyone comes across as like this very, like, boring, generic white collar worker. I have friends who clearly have to post on social media, or post on LinkedIn as part of their job, like especially if they attended a recent conference or things like that. And I have like certain like Boston friends who, cannot talk without an F-bomb coming out of their mouth every 3 sentences. And they're very stately on LinkedIn and using all sorts of huge lexicon of words that I don't think they normally typically use. It always gives me a good laugh when I'm like, yeah, that's what that person would post on social media. Talking about all the tremendous networking that they were able to do at this recent business conference, and talking about, future leadership and opportunities and things like that.
Okay. quickly we'll run through some things. Let me put this on the screen. So Catherine Newman is she has been for a while. This is not new news, but in June it was announced that Catherine Newman is WWE's new executive vice president and the head of marketing. I learned on Friday that there were at least, I don't know where to put this. I got 4 to 5 names. I don't know if there's more, but there were layoffs to WWE's marketing department. When you hear layoffs, I worry that people are going to think that this is part of some larger set of layoffs. I don't have any reason to believe that it is. There were some pretty serious layoffs in 2021 and 2020 when people were furloughed due to the pandemic, and then in 2021 there was a lot of consolidation. As my understanding is, WWE believed that they had a lot of redundancy. They had a lot of people in multiple departments doing the same job, and something like upwards of 60 people were laid off in spring 2021. So there's that. So it could be related to marketing being under new leadership with the hiring of Catherine Newman, who is a new executive. She was formerly with Manchester United. We touched on last week. Do you have something, Cole?
No, I was scratching my invisible beard.
Yes.
In regards to the marketing person being hired, we've heard before that there was maybe some disappointment at the corporate level in the performance in WWE's ability to get tier 1 advertisers and things like that.
Yes.
Would this be related to that, or would this be a different department?
That's a good question. They also announced, Craig Stimmer a few weeks ago. They announced that they hired someone from Snapchat to be their new head of sales and advertising. I think the title is. Yeah, there's what you're alluding to, Jesse, is that there's been a lot of analyst questioning around and executive talk around that they could do more to sell advertising and sponsorships, which would be things.
Apparently, Stephanie McMahon was fired because she was so bad at her job in that department.
And we've had that disputed by Fightful and The Observer. Who knows? That this is the Business Insider report that came out just after she announced her leave of absence in May. According to Business Insider, one insider says that she was pushed out by her father, Vince. Who knows what the real story is? But yeah, they believe that they can at some point in the next few years get to $100 million of media advertising and sponsorship revenue, and they're like just over halfway there, I think, at this point, in terms of annual revenue. Last week we touched on the fight happening with CM Punk and the EVPs. I wouldn't be surprised if everybody involved in that was an employee, including obviously the EVPs have dual status as employees. Jericho mentioned in 2019 that he has dual status as an independent contractor and as a wrestler, as both an employee and an independent contractor. And I would think that the EVPs are also in dual status. I mean, they obviously are, and I would not be surprised if it was part of CM Punk's deal that he is a dual status worker with AEW, which may complicate, I don't know to what extent. I've been trying to find a lawyer with experience in similar situations that might be able to educate us on what the possible outcomes are of this investigation that the AEW is conducting in determining what they're going to do with everybody involved in this fight who are currently suspended.
Right, and obviously all the other people, things like the agents and backstage people like Christopher Daniels and Ace Steel and Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler, are all also employees.
Right. Pat Buck, I believe Pat Buck and Brandon Cutler were both at TV, and they are no longer suspended. Jesse, are you going to Survivor Series in Boston?
I'm not going to Survivor Series in Boston. I haven't been to a WWE show in years. And I don't.
You haven't? What's the last WWE show you were at?
Would have been a pay-per-view show. I forget which one it was. It probably would have been maybe
WrestleMania WrestleMania 14.
No, it was not WrestleMania 14. I didn't go to that one. TLC, like 2018, maybe.
Okay. Was it good?
I can't even remember, dude. I remember going to the Hell in a Cell show, which had the Sasha Banks Charlotte main event. Hell in a Cell match. That would have been, I think, before that TLC and show, but I haven't. That was probably the last time I've been to a WWE show. I'm trying to think if I went to like a Raw or something, but I probably haven't. So it probably has been a very long time. Survivor Series, I mean, the pacing of WWE shows is so bad that that really discourages me from going. Beyond just, I mean, beyond, I don't have a ton of interest in the product in general, but the pacing of the shows feels like death if I were in the arena. It's hard enough watching at home.
Yeah. So Survivor Series in Boston is sold out, or at least there's very few tickets that are left, because basically all the tickets were bought up very quickly after the general on sale. So there's a possibility that there's going to be a War Games match. I believe there's a War Games match that's being considered for Survivor Series. However, an obstacle for that, I understand, is the seating configuration. They sold all these floor seats, or most of them. This is a ticket map that we're looking at. That's not the most up-to-date ticket map, but it's from WrestleTix. So maybe this configuration would have to change to get 2 rings on the floor, but that's something I wouldn't be surprised to see happen.
They might have to do the WCW Tower of Doom, just stack them on top of each other.
Wouldn't be opposed. And NXT taped their TV taping. They did their live TV on Tuesday, and then they taped their TV on Wednesday. So next Tuesday's episode will be a taped episode, so they won't be doing a live episode in the PC until the following Tuesday. I believe this is because they're working on a new set to go along with the new black and gold rebrand. Anybody remember the King of the Ring Countdown special last year on Fox? Everybody remembers that, right? No, nobody remembers that. There's going to be another WWE special on Fox, I'm told, on Sunday, October 2nd. So that'll have a big NFL lead-in audience, some sort of best of show or something like that. This will be just ahead of Extreme Rules. And day one may or may not be day one this year. This could be happening on a day other than January 1st. January 1st falls on a Sunday this week, or this year, or next year, I guess. It falls on a Sunday. So I don't know if they're trying to do pay-per-views that are not on Sundays as much anymore. I think every pay-per-view for the rest of the year is a Saturday, if I'm not wrong. So this would be on a Saturday or on a Sunday if it was on January 1st. So we'll see what happens there. If it's not on January 1st, I would expect it to be rebranded as something other than day one, for obvious reasons. And we've discussed in previous episodes the notion that, well, maybe AEW has trouble getting into certain venues because maybe they're blocked by WWE. There was this story in 2020 about WWE, I believe Fightful originally reported this, that AEW wanted to get into a certain arena in Cincinnati, which is called what? The Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati. WWE had an existing relationship, or maybe still has an existing relationship with that venue, and AEW wasn't able to get into it anyway. They ended up going to a different arena, which, do I have it here? I don't have it here. They ended up going to a different arena, and this is just before the pandemic. And we've discussed, maybe AEW decided to run the Coca-Cola Coliseum in Toronto because maybe they couldn't get access to Scotiabank. Maybe they couldn't get access to it. This is highly speculative. Maybe they couldn't get access to it because obviously WWE is run there and they ran there very recently. Maybe WWE has that venue blocked. I don't think that's the case. I think that as much as what prevents AEW from getting dates on certain venues just has to do with the calendar and what is booked in those arenas besides wrestling. And I don't know if I've seen speculation, but it's occurred to me that, AEW, for all the times that they've run Chicago, has never run. Does anybody know what this building is up here on the top here? Does anyone recognize this venue?
That the Allstate Arena?
That is the Rosemont Horizon.
Okay.
Currently known as the Car Insurance Arena. Yes.
Is that not the Allstate Arena?
It is. The Rosemont Horizon and the Allstate Arena are the same venue.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, I see this speculated about online sometimes. I don't think WWE is really blocking. They may be trying to block AEW from venues, but I don't think that that's happening in an effective way anyway. We did learn that the AEW announced on Wednesday that they're going to Seattle in January. So now that the markets that AEW has not been to in the United States, major markets, are the Bay Area, which is, according to Fightful, possibly where the Revolution pay-per-view will end up in March or February. Maybe the Cow Palace, if you really want the Observer to promote it. So the Bay Area looks like it's coming up next. Phoenix is another market, and Portland. They also haven't been to Salt Lake City or Denver since the pandemic.
Okay. I was going to say they have been to Salt Lake City. San Diego would be the big one, right?
San Diego's another one. Yes, I forgot about that. Phoenix. I think Tampa. They haven't really been to, but they've been everywhere else in Florida.
They've been within sensible driving distance to Tampa because they've run in Orlando, and that's like 90 minutes away.
I looked into it. It's like a 2-hour drive. I don't know.
And in Seattle, they are running the big arena there, the A Arena, the Seattle Kraken Arena, otherwise known as the Crack House.
For the new hockey team.
Climate Pledge Arena, new arena in Seattle.
Which interesting tidbit that is going to be on January 4th, so that can kind of rule out maybe some major AEW stars on Wrestle Kingdom that we've heard the rumor. That
Certainly Bryan Danielson looks unlikely for Wrestle Kingdom if they're also going to be in Seattle, since he would be the biggest local attraction to that market. And on the poster, they put him and Swerve and Darby Allin as front and center as the 3 Seattle guys on the roster.
Okay. And we did, clicking on the wrong thing. We did Who's a Draw analysis. We did talent analytics this past week. And I've apologized to the Jaguars, and I owe apology to Jesse. As I've learned here from CM Punk of late, the apology has to be as loud as the disrespect. Roman Reigns, not that much of a quarter-hour draw, at least in the months of April 1st to the present. We did our talent analytics this past Thursday for subscribers. You can find that podcast and those slides on the Patreon. He does perform well on YouTube. He does perform well in Google Trends. I've been scraping now W Shop. I did one day's worth of scrape of W Shop, and we did an index to not get into the convoluted math here. But what he doesn't perform particularly well, in my way of doing the math and the analysis, is quarter hours. So not that big of a quarter-hour draw.
Does anything else on here stand? I'm curious to know, does anything else stand out to you besides that Roman Reigns being lower? Anyone else who's maybe unusual?
Yeah, and to be clear, before people run to Twitter and say Wrestlenomics said Roman Reigns is not a draw, he still ended up in this analysis where I used an index for these 4 different categories: YouTube, quarter hours, Google Trends, and merchandise, to be number 1 for the period from April 1st to the present. What stood out here? My main takeaways are that the biggest stars for WWE and AEW, and we can debate about them comparatively, but the biggest stars for WWE and AEW respectively are Roman Reigns and CM Punk. MJF, as somebody who's young, is up here pretty high. It's hard for people who are younger to get this high just because they haven't been around very long, and the longer you're around really gives you an advantage in this media environment, apparently. The number 1 merchandise draw, at least on the day that I scraped it, what did I do? I scraped W Shop, and I took the top 60 items, and then I did a reverse rank value, and I added it up. Number 1 on W Shop in that analysis is who?
Roman Reigns?
No. Golo knows.
Cody?
Golo doesn't remember?
No, I remember. Sorry, I was muted. Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yes. And who is number 2?
The NWO.
So there's that.
Does Rousey ranking low seem unusual, or at least notable?
I would say
it doesn't
she
seem
is the last
surprising.
person on the table here, but I wouldn't say that this is like an indicative of her being low. This table in total had like hundreds of people on it, although she is like number, I don't know what this would be, 25 or something. But still, maybe that's meaningful.
I think it correlates at least a little bit with her status as a star within the company feeling lessened than it was in previous incarnations of her time in WWE.
I could definitely say this, that like when I do the Google Trends, I'm doing it's never in any actual unit, any absolute value like number of searches, but it's always giving me some sort of relative value based on what the high point is for whatever time period of time I'm looking at. And of all the people I collect, which is like over like 500 people at this point, who I believe are wrestling related personalities, and they actually have a Google profile that I can collect. The person, and this goes from 2004 to the present, so 18 years of time. The person who has the highest data point, and remember, this is a data set that would include The Rock and Bad Bunny and John Cena and Lord knows who else. The person who has the highest data point over those 18 years is Ronda Rousey when she's at her peak in UFC. So she's way, way lower than she was at that peak. I can definitely say that.
Yeah, I'm thinking more relative to her previous run in WWE. Obviously, she's not as popular in WWE as she was in UFC, when for that period of time she was one of the most popular athletes in the world. And certainly one of the biggest money drawing acts in professional sports. But relative to her previous run, it seems to me that the further she is removed from her peak as a UFC draw, the less of a star she feels like as a wrestling draw, because her popularity in UFC has not been sustained out now that her fighting career has stopped, in that hasn't gone on to become like a general icon in sports the way that somebody like Tiger Woods or Serena Williams would be. And that was who she was at least rivaling in terms of notoriety at her peak in some ways. And I wonder if that, like, has her wrestling career at all impacted her overall popularity? Or is everything just stemming from her running
one other
UFC?
woman on this list, right, who is Alexa Bliss.
We're getting the point.
No Becky Lynch, no Charlotte Flair, no Sasha Banks even. In this, I think this is 25 people.
We're getting to the point that her wrestling career is almost as long as her UFC career, because it wasn't like super long.
Yeah.
No, I mean, how many fights did she have in UFC? Like a dozen, maybe more?
Yeah.
Okay, we better get to Super Chats before it's almost time for NFL football.
All right. So we will start here with our friend Primo Cologne. With Warner Brothers Discovery stocks plummeting, what is Zaslav's end game?
What the Hollywood Reporter article alludes to is, and this isn't Zaslav's end game, but the notion that NBCU could acquire, I guess, WBD. I don't know. This is a little bit out of my level of depth to get into the finances of mergers and acquisitions, but I think what Zaslav is doing is he wants to run a more efficient company, and one that doesn't have a lot of debt that would make a merger or acquisition more difficult. You know, if he's doing a merger and acquisition, and if it's important for a merger or acquisition to have a lean company that doesn't have a lot of debt and doesn't have a lot of spending, a lot of the kind of spending that we've seen more prevalent in the run up to the streaming wars, then that would be consistent with maybe preparing the company to be merged or acquired by another in a few years.
All right. Moving on, Tim B, when he was asking us a question earlier, he said it was about profitability, not revenue. So, but I think a factor here, and you can obviously, Brandon, Jessica, touch on it, is that WWE has a lot of revenue streams, more than AEW.
So WWE's net income, last year was over $100 million, and AEW probably didn't generate $100 million in revenue, not to mention profitability, if they were profitable at all.
Yeah, the only way I could see it happening beyond just a gigantic shift in popularity between the two brands would be something like when the WWE Network was launched and WWE had this one quarter or year where they were really didn't make any money because the startup costs were so high. I don't know what they would attempt to do that would be similar to that now. But that would be the only way I could see like a kind of fluking AEW's way into having higher profitability for a quarter.
Yeah, taking on some huge project like the XFL or
Yeah.
I think there was
when there's an NXT for every single continent and every single country, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think just the notion that WWE might be acquired. I don't know how genuinely interested they are in that. I think they're at least somewhat open to that, or at least some of the executives are open to that, would be my guess. And because of that, I would think that they would not get involved in some sort of high cost business project that would make them less conducive to being sold. If nothing else, it keeps the stock price strong.
Speaking of WWE being acquired, Lee Butler asked the likelihood that Tony could purchase WWE after a merger.
I doubt it, because I don't know. That he would be the one to buy it because he has lots of money, because Shad Khan is a billionaire. I doubt that would happen, but stranger things have happened.
It's going to be purchased by a big media property.
Well, first, from my perspective, was why would Tony want to buy WWE? If he's willing to spend a lot of money, wouldn't he just want to spend money on his own wrestling product that he's building himself, as opposed to buying Vince McMahon's wrestling product? I suppose a world exists where the WWE becomes for sale years from now. Perhaps AEW is not around. But Tony, who has a lot of personal wealth and at least a track record of running a wrestling company, were to lead some sort of investment group purchasing WWE. That would be a possible scenario.
Plausible scenario, yes.
Right, because Tony has a lot of friends in the business community. What if he owns the Jaguars and he gets together with a couple other NFL owners and they say, let's try to buy WWE. I know how to take it to the next level because I'm a successful wrestling promoter. Maybe AEW's around and they merge them. I don't know. But that would be the more plausible situation where Tony would be kind of the leader of a wider investment group, as opposed to Tony just liquidating his dad's. Tony inherits his dad's money and then liquidates his assets to buy WWE for $5 billion.
Yes. I think it will cost more than $5 billion to acquire WWE. Yeah. Yes.
Next super chat, Louis Ducati. My first memories of wrestling are Swoggle winning the Cruiserweight title and Khali. Arthur Ashe ticket sales good? Or are they hurt by the altercation, more the non-PR impacts?
WrestleTix had a update on Arthur Ashe. I think they're at 12,000 distributed. So they're not going to reach the 20,000 or whatever it was that they reached last year. I believe ticket prices are substantially higher. Their gate might end up being higher. Most of these ticket sales were made before the all-out fight, so I don't think that's having a huge impact. I just think one thing, ticket prices are higher, but besides that, there was a novelty in this show happening for the first time. AEW was a lot hotter September last year than they are September this year, coming off the newness of CM Punk, the newness of Bryan Danielson, and AEW was a hotter product a year ago. I think we've said this a couple times in recent episodes, but it's getting clearer to me just how hot a period that was for AEW in August and September of 2021.
Right, you're not going to be able to recreate the first few months of CM Punk's return to wrestling in 8 years. And also throwing in things like Bryan Danielson jumping from WWE to AEW. The first, I know they sold a lot of the tickets before the match was announced, but Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson's is a gigantic match that you're not going to be able to recreate. They have moved tickets well the past week or so since they kind of confirmed that it's going to be Moxley versus Danielson. WrestleTix has been keeping track of kind of their daily tickets distributed since that match has been announced, and the numbers are much healthier than you would see on a normal week leading up to an AEW show. So I would say
The
that the ticket
latest
sales
count
are,
from WrestleTix is 12,471.
and that's
12,471.
up. That's like probably two. I don't want to say the wrong number, but I think that's like 2,000 up since like last Monday.
I think they got to 10,000 in a few days.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
But
say.
then they stuck there for a while, which is generally what happens with AEW, is that a lot of their tickets are sold right away. And then they might add a little bit after that, but they really don't move that much after the first sale, which is very different than WWE, which WWE shows we've seen will start off kind of slow, but then pick up in the days leading up to it, the week leading up to it. And I think we can debate about why that is. WWE's fan base is more of a late arriving fan base. WWE is better and more aggressive at local advertising and things like that. WWE comps more tickets out, whatever you want to say. It's just the ticket selling pattern is a little bit different between the two companies. Credit to Louis for his first memories of wrestling are Hornswoggle winning the Cruiserweight title and Great Khali, and yet he's still a wrestling fan.
Yeah. Moving on, MJ, just a comment. How does TK know it's a boom and not bots?
Fair question. Fair question.
Primo Cologne is back, and the summer or fall 2021 AEW was doing over $1 million. Was usually when it did a 0.40 in the demo. Recently, we're seeing AEW do $1 million with 0.34 to 39 or more older audience watching.
Oh, let me get the big spreadsheet out. So usually AEW's audience is about 50%, 50% in the demo. I have not noticed it being less in the demo. I mean, I do have a lot of median age here, which should highly correlate with that, I would think. I can probably pull up the median age chart, which would be fairly relevant to that. Median age, this will be hard to display. So if I look at the percentage of viewers so it was 510,000 viewers in the demo this week for Dynamite, which is what as a percentage. Let's see here, 510 divided by 1175, 43%. I'm just going to do a pivot table right on the air here. Let's share this if I can. Stop that share. Grab this. I'm going to put the Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet on the screen, which you can get access to yourself at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. So I have to change this to 2 and change this to this. And if I say, I think I want the date here, and I want program in the filters, we only want to look at Dynamite. Here's Dynamite, and we want to look at program. Well, I guess we don't need to do that. So I need to look at P18 to 49, and I want to look at P2 plus, which is the total audience. People are seeing this, okay. The average, that won't change it, but I definitely need the average for this value, right? Good, okay. So if I just divide the demo divided by the total audience, that goes down, percentage. So very early on, those early episodes had like 60% in the demo. If we go right to the bottom to see what we had most recently, 43%. So this is in the mid 40s, sometimes the low 40s lately. The mid 40s, if we look back, which is what Primo Cologne is asking, about September, right? September 2021, summer, fall 2021, where we had, if I just grab a section of time here from August to October, the average percentage that was in the demo was about 50%, 49.8%. And if we look at, I don't know, let's grab a handful of weeks going back to like the middle of July, again, that was 50%. This is 44%. So we are seeing a somewhat older audience. Yes. But still probably different than if I were to look at, let's say, what does Raw do by the same measure, just to give us a little bit of context here. If I populate that down because Raw has a much longer history. Raw is about a third in the demo.
Wrestling
W just tends to have an
fans,
older audience. Yeah.
I do wonder, as we get, as the last boom of, well, the last real boom for wrestling fans gets further and further away, will we see the fans who are currently holding up the 18 to 49 demo slip out of that demo or slip out of the 18 to 34 demo?
Yeah.
As you guys know, the Attitude Era was a very, very, very long time ago. It was like a million years ago. So the people that were made
You don't
fans
even
during
remember
that,
it,
so people that were made fans during that time period are not necessarily going to be long in the 18 to 49 demo.
Yeah.
So
I would say whenever we're looking at TV viewership data, traditional TV viewership data, that it has a bias toward being older. And I'm a year older than I was last year, in fact. So that's happening also. So what I'm saying is that, this is already, watching traditional TV is already something that people who are older tend to do.
Correct.
And as we get older, we get older. So that form of consumption, media consumption, gets older over time. But this is still exceeding one year per year, probably.
yes, AEW is typically, and Dave does this analysis every week, typically AEW is the youngest skewing sports show on television. Some weeks, like an F1 race might beat it. Maybe there's a Champions League game that does it. But AEW, even with, maybe we could, their audience, maybe if they're getting slightly older, is still younger than the NFL, the NBA, college football, baseball, hockey, whatever other sport you want to throw at it.
So these are the median age data. This is a moving 13-week average. So 13 weeks is just 1/4 of a year. These are the median age. This is a median age line chart that we're looking at here. And what's really remarkable, just looking at this, is how much older Rampage has gotten over time, and how much SmackDown has separated from Raw. Raw has gotten younger over these last 6 months or so. SmackDown has gotten a little bit older. I would say it's mostly staying the same. Impact has gotten a little bit younger. NXT has gotten a little bit younger over the last 6 months or so. New Japan is the oldest show on U.S. television. What I would say about this is that I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier, that the younger people tend to be more selective with their traditional TV consumption, and they're more open to watching. This is just a narrative that I'm extrapolating onto this data. Younger people are more open to watching Raw. For some reason, they're not taking to SmackDown. That's bared out in the ratings in terms of the increases that we're seeing to viewership for Raw, and the decreases that we're seeing for Rampage, which has coincided with its viewership getting older. Does this all make sense? Am I saying something that makes any sort of sense here?
Yeah.
Younger people I think they may be watching. So this is a story that I'm laying on top of data, but younger people may be following a given company, WAW, but they're being a lot more choosy with whether or not they're going to sit down and watch this thing, the whole show.
And people that are more savvy with their technology are going to be perhaps more comfortable missing an episode. It's not just DVR, but I know it's fairly easy for me to catch up on the major points of an episode of Dynamite. If I miss it, I can go to their YouTube page the next day and watch the key segments and the conclusions to the key matches. I can search through stuff on social media. My dad misses his favorite television program. I don't know if he has the same capacity to be able to catch up with it the way that I do, because just his knowledge of technology is much lower, and that could probably be used for a lot of older people versus younger people when it comes to finding it necessary to watch something live.
And I think there's, I don't know how to describe it in words, really. When a show feels really newsworthy, it's a really big deal. The example I always bring up is the CM Punk debut on Rampage. And if you look at what just for a second, we looked at the very early Dynamites had like 60% of their viewership within the demo. So I don't have the median age for those episodes, but I imagine it was quite low relative to what we're seeing today. It's just when a program is actually relevant, to use a judgmental word, younger viewers tend to watch it more so than otherwise. What else we got, Golo?
We just had 2 super chat comments from MJ, both from MJ. Mergers and acquisitions. Come on, guys, it's a business podcast. Well, now I know for the future.
That'll be on the next Jeopardy.
And then MJ saying, Jesse, go to live shows. The insights are invaluable, and studying the live business and consumer experience. And he says more than 2 cents, of course.
Never. I go to live shows all the time. I just haven't been to WWE shows, and I have thought about going to WWE shows solely for the interest of studying like who's over at these shows and what kind of the audience reaction is. But it's a tough ask. I don't like WWE's product, so do I want to spend money and time on, WWE's product?
It's improved though. Look at the cage match ratings.
It hasn't the product is more watchable than it was a few months ago. I think
there's a
the broader
that it's improved.
The broader questions I have about the product at the moment is we've yet to see really any of Triple H's bigger booking plans unfold yet. It isn't quite clear who he's going to actually push as a top star, and when are we going to really start seeing his fingerprints on the product outside of some smaller changes and some more time allotted to wrestling. I think that's ultimately what's going to make or break the sustainability of them getting some fans back recently, is if the product over the long term feels significantly different and goes into a more exciting creative direction than what they're currently in now, which seems to be mostly staying the course from what Vince had patterned.
All right. Well, you're all caught up.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah.
Plugs.
You can go, Jesse.
Not that much this week. I haven't written or podcasted anything outside of Wrestlenomics. So just follow me at Jesse Collins, JESSECOLLINGS on Twitter. Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. That's up on YouTube. Just search Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast on YouTube. Our latest episode is talking with Nick Hausman of WrestlingInc.com. We talk about the CM Punk presser, of which he was the notable target of CM Punk's ire originally, before he expanded his hatred to the wider wrestling media audience. But he talks a lot about, the kind of his experience being in these AEW media scrums, what he thinks of kind of like the other media that can be there. How do you ask difficult questions and make sure that you're invited back next time? Those kind of things that are happening. Really insightful stuff from Nick. I definitely recommend checking that out. But other than that, that's all that's been going on over here.
Okay. I did try to make a vectorization of your logo. It didn't work out well for me though.
It's okay.
Golo.
Well, yeah, you could follow me, Chris Gullo, on all social media outlets, RTI Pod on Twitter and Instagram, Rediscover Indies on Facebook, just to catch up on our Dragon Gate USA episodes. And then you can get a shirt, a Bowtie Mafia shirt from Pro Wrestling Tees. You not only support your favorite ring announcer, but the best team in football.
Are you stealing IP from the Bills?
So here's the thing. Pro Wrestling Tees just issued a Bills-inspired T-shirt that they just put out.
Okay. It must pass then.
Are you selling them outside of on like a cart outside of the stadium? Because you see like all the unlicensed shirts are always sold.
Are you going to the game Monday? Tomorrow?
Oh yes, I will. I will be at the game on Monday Night Football. I took the day off work and should be fun.
Okay. Patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. You can get access to the TV ratings reports that come out nearly every day. I've been posting quarter hours as well for all the WBD shows. Access to the Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet, which we spent a little bit of time looking at earlier. If you want access to that yourself, you can get access by being a patron. You get slides to all the podcasts that we do, including this one. We just did, I don't know, we've been doing this, I think, 4 weeks in a row now. Gullo and I on Thursday evenings, just after the Dynamite rating comes out. We've been doing a highly caffeinated 30-minute podcast going over things such as whatever is relevant in the trailing days, including the Dynamite rating and whatever else is going on. That's all I have for now. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to Post Wrestling for being our podcast distribution partner. And we'll talk to you all next time. Bye.